Very good evening and welcome. You're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. As the Modi government completes 9 years of being in power, the BJP is in celebration mode. The party has planned a month-long campaign to celebrate the 9th anniversary, which incidentally is today, the 30th of May. Now, the question and what we're going to look at today is what has the last 9 years of the Modi government pertaining to economics or Modinomics been like? What are the hits? What are the misses? To speak more on this, I'm joined today by Madhavan Narayanan, senior journalist, Yatish Rajawat Founder Center for Innovation in Public Policy is with me on the show. I'm also speaking with Partha, Professor Emeritus, Delhi School of Economics. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us today on the show as we look at the hits and misses and some of the, unique and very, very big announcements. Partha, let me start from 2016. Demonetization, a year later, GST, all announcements and changes which were tough to digest at first, but were always positioned as something that the economy needed and was good eventually. Has that been proven right?
I'm not sure about demonetization because demonetization, I think, did a lot of harm to the MSME sector. The firms which are dependent on credit and are very small units. So, in economics, we say that they need to match their demand and their credit demand with other small entities. So you give that sector a shock, it takes a long time to recover. So demonetization was, in my opinion, a self-goal. I mean, what were the positives which couldn't have been done otherwise? I'm not sure. Now, GST, for instance, clearly needed to be done. We needed a single market. You couldn't have trucks waiting outside states just because they had crossed the state border for paperwork. But one has to go into these things with your eyes open, because you see, if you are going to move from direct taxes towards indirect taxes, then you have five slabs of taxes, 6 slabs of taxes. Now, that's not how a GST works. GST should have 1 or 2 tax slabs with some exemptions. So I think that, it was not thought through, and there was a lot of hoopla and gaiety, but I don't think this was thought through. Whereas I think demonetization was a disaster from the word go, notwithstanding the reasons that were trotted out for it.
Okay, so various things happened, and I started with 2016 onwards because I would say the shake-up for functioning started from there. One of the big sort of changes in the way people started transacting was the advent of digital payments, which were already growing but grew massively after this. Yatish Rajawat, let's start from that portion, because if I track it along the GDP growth line, post 2016 shake-up, 2017 GST also had some impact for a time. Then we were climbing back, we were improving, and then COVID hit. How would you see these big decisions, policy decisions that were made in the last 9 years?
So, I mean, Tamanna, to look at these policy decisions, we need to look at, what is the primary purpose of government? The primary purpose of government is to basically give you better governance, and better governance is only possible if the government has proper collection of taxes. Now, what GST did was basically formalized a lot of sectors that existed outside the system, which existed in the informal sector. You look at the GST collection for last year, it is 18 lakh crores. The budgetary estimate was something like 7 lakh crores. So see the improvement just as 1 year, and you will realize that, now it is the largest or the second largest source of revenue for the government. And this in turn has led to formalization of a lot of MSME also. Second aspect, we keep talking about the now growth in, income tax pay, from 2.6 crore to 5.53 crores. It's just doubled. But look at the income tax collection. In just 1 year, 2022-23, it has grown by 20 to 30%, when the economy has grown at 7%. So some part of governance or systems are working right to make better collection possible. So both at the GST level, which is leading to formalization of the economy in a far greater manner, and income tax collection as a system has improved. These are two building blocks of governance systems. And both these systems are now possibly better than anywhere else in the world. And I will qualify that. Why it is better than anywhere else in the world? Because we are using far more digitization than anywhere else in the world. We are actually using artificial intelligence
Monetization for it.
in both
Did
these
we need
systems.
demonetization to find ourselves on that path?
So, I'm not an expert on demonetization. I think, but I'm what I have studied and what I have learned in the last few years is that you need systems, and the systems need to operate, and those systems need to then operate in the benefit of larger public good. And that is only possible if there is efficiency in tax collection. And second, there is effective utilization of government resources. So I'll come to the government resources part if you want me to talk about it. See, the actual distribution of government resources has increased much more in the last 10 years than ever in the past, largely because of the combination of Aadhaar and digitization of the whole chain from the government right down to the last beneficiary. This was not done before, this was not possible before, but this means that the money which is intended for the individual or the beneficiary reaches that beneficiary. Now, if that is not an improvement, I don't know what it is.
Okay, so let's list out what we can definitely say are hits. Finally, bringing GST after years of this being on the back burner and center versus state, etc. It's happened. IBC, another policy move and law which needed to be pushed. The India stack, I mean UPI is a success story that the world is talking about. Madhavan, would you agree that these are the major hits?
IBC is certainly not a hit. I mean, let's look back a little, because we are looking at the Modi government and particularly from 2016. But I would like you to take a look at the progress in IT through the decades, not just in IT exports, but also in central government agencies like the Center for Development of Advanced Computing and the National Informatics Center. So India's IT e-governance story, if I may say so, is a continuing story. Even mobile wallets were being planned and thought of before the Modi government took off. So to its credit, they have accelerated and advertised and boosted and evangelized these things. To that extent, it's very good. And then, of course, the India stack is a great idea. And now we have the ONDC, which is the e-commerce equivalent of UPI taking place. All that is actually very good. But I must say it's a continuing story. But it's caught fire thanks to three things. One is demonetization, which proved to be a blessing in disguise for mobile payment. Today, you can see bullock carts with Paytm and UPI scan codes in the streets of suburbs of Delhi, and that captures so much. I can tell you, Tamanna. But having said that, let me also say that this is a continuous story. Looking at IBC, I would say it's a disaster. I mean, I've called it a judicial bureaucratization of the banking system, because recovery rate has been as low as 26% or 20+%. And
no IBC, then the imperfect version we have now. I'm just looking at from the context, Madhavan, of the years waiting for some kind of legislation to come in to figure out what to do with these companies that have nowhere to go.
That's true, but it's not enough to have good intention. You must understand that India is going through a demographic transition, in which there's a big entrepreneurial spirit. Now, let me contrast it with the Mudra loan. I've been looking at the Mudra loan data, Tamanna. Actually, Mudra loans are doing pretty well in spite of the warnings or the notes of caution sounded by the likes of Dr. Raghuram Rajan. I'm just taking a true objective picture. Mudra loan NPA rates have been only 3% or plus 4% maybe. And something like 40 crore loans or more, 50 crore perhaps loans have been given, which is in sheer number, it means every third Indian citizen has access to a Mudra loan, which is like the NREGA for entrepreneurs. That's a great thing. And but if you look at the numbers of, in terms of loans dispersed, 4 lakh crores have been given, or maybe 5 lakh crores, whereas twice that amount almost has been, considered on the IBC program, and of which only 26% have been recovered. And most important is the slow grinding process of IBC. You were supposed to say these concerns as going concerns. Nothing happened. You have layers and layers. You don't even know what's going on in spite of tracking it. There is NCLT. There is, as they say, Tariq pe Tariq, Tariq pe Tariq. There have been hearings going on. Haircuts have been as high as 76%. I mean, do you call this success?
Yeah.
Just because you have something called IBC, you cannot call it a success.
There was an attempt. There was an attempt to
do you call an attempt? I mean,
no. I'm saying something else. There was an attempt to put a timeline, a deadline for the judiciary to resolve IBC issues, and that was sort of, it never saw the light of day because
exactly that's the point.
Judiciary works in its own way, and of course that those are
there has been
issues.
a lack of creativity in a very sweet spot. Let me give you one more interesting context to this. The Modi government in the first 5 years had the sweetest spot in terms of low oil prices. That was the God-sent boom, because it was not because of Modi that the oil prices Brent fell from $100 per barrel levels to $35 per level. It was a wonderful opportunity for India to be creative. A bad bank, what Narsil could have been set up earlier, and some of the loans could have been taken off the books. The recapitalization could have taken place earlier than actually did. And that's the way I'm looking at it. Apart from that, I'm not personally, today is not the day to go do this, but IBC has been marked by a certain amount of bureaucratic thinking in which you think that it's all about just the procedural recovery of loans. What happens to the entrepreneurial energies of this nation? You're talking about Startup India on the one hand, you're talking about Mudra loans on the other hand, and the other hand, you're letting these big companies bleed, go into NCLT, and you know how these crony capitalist system works by proxy. You have people using all sorts of lawyers and loopholes to delay the process, delay the recovery. That's what is going on. And honestly, if you believe Mr. Modi's statement that he believes in maximum governance and minimum government, and if he believes that he's decisive, then this should have happened. Look at the unseemly haste that was shown in the case of Demonetization 1 as well as 2. So if some of that conviction had been put forward and some creative Indian way found out, because Mr. Modi is also a nationalist by his own assertion, then there should have been an Indian way to sort this problem out by coming out with some kind of equity restructuring.
GST teething pains, but has eventually settled. You've had several months.
GST, I'm very happy.
Of 1 lakh crore plus, income. Demonetization, most say that really wasn't required. We're still wondering what happened and why it happened, what it did to the economy. IBC, well-intentioned, but definitely a work in progress. Because we're trying to recap so many things in a short period of time, so I'm going to move to another aspect which I think we should cover, and I'll come to Professor Sen on this. We would be amiss if we didn't speak about the handling of the economy during COVID-19 in this period. If there is one thing that everyone faced and was a big challenge, it was COVID-19. How do you think we fared then in the last 9 years?
I think the problem about policy making is that not everything is wrong, not everything is to be discarded, but it's a lot of knee-jerk. There is no discussion on these issues before things happen. Now, it is not the fault of this government, but since independence, India has just not spent money on public health. Okay, so and that abysmal state continues to today. So this is the problem that we talk about entrepreneurial spirits. We talk about how the economy is doing well and things like that. But there is the large underbelly of India, which has been left out of the growth process. So let me come to your specific question. You see. When the lockdown was announced, if anyone's ever walked in New Delhi or Bombay and looked at the informal labor force, notwithstanding the fact that there would have been some increase in exposure, the thing to do would have been to let the informal workers go home, because ultimately they did. The state couldn't prevent that, although they did their best to prevent that. Now, then by and large, you can say that, okay, the thing about getting the health sector's reaction later on was fine, but I think Delhi's second wave was, it was impossible to imagine that this was the national capital of India, the most pampered part. There were dead bodies, being cremated along the ring road. And if you know Delhi, you know what I'm talking about. Now, is that something that we got overwhelmed by COVID-19? The answer is no, because there were relief work was being done by gurudwaras, for instance. They were providing oxygen. So why couldn't the state provide
tough
oxygen?
days. There's no denying it. We had a few tough days, but we also managed to cover ourselves with vaccinations in a nation that is so populous.
I mean, yes,
So,
this is the thing.
And I agree with what you said, Professor Sen. These are complex issues. We say because for a news header you need a hits and miss. It is much more nuanced than that. There's a paucity of time, and I quickly want to get views in. So bear with me. Yes, Yatish, I want to talk about economy, COVID, and economy recovery post-COVID. Then you had a war. It's been a tough 9 years. If Madhavan talks about the sweet spot in the beginning, the rest has been downhill in terms of issues. Yes, Yatish.
Let me put it into context, okay? Both the IBC question and the COVID question. You see, it is the excise tax collected because of low fuel prices that enabled the government to actually give food for almost 2 years to people who fall below the poverty line. You remember the whole food subsidy plan, which, actually led to the second win, which the government got. And that food subsidy plan continues. Second point, IBC has to be looked at as part of a system. It's part of the banking system and it's part of the recovery system. Recovery is always part of loan giving. Now, look at the main system. NPAs there are at a 10-year low. Net NPAs are at 7-year low. Private banks NPAs are at 1%. Net private sector banks NPAs. So do you think that system has been reformed and is working better than 10 years? Yes, it is. Is the IBC working perfectly? No, it is not. So like GST, it again needs continuous changes, continuous management, and it will continue to evolve and become better. But when the credit systems are robust, the economy is higher formalized, there is digitization.
I request you to wrap that point, Yatish, because I have very little time.
So
yes.
my point is basically that we could survive COVID and vaccination was fast again because of digitization. We could give better subsidy, better food subsidy during COVID and after COVID was because of our budget or our resources with the government being better in the low oil period. So, if you see it in context, then you'll see that there are now better systems and some of these systems are not necessarily built by the government. So, but the government has adopted them much more better than any previous government or any other government in the world. Even better than American or European governments. We have been better at digitization than any of these global majors, so to say. So, you must realize that there is a fundamental shift and change. We can keep ruing and crying over what happened in demonetization and ignore whatever systemic
No,
and
there is
reforms
no
that has
ruing.
happened.
There is no ruing. There is no crime. There is clinical assessment, and simply because this is something that the government is celebrating. Otherwise, typically you would celebrate 5 and 10 years, not 9 years, but we're in a pre-election year. So you need to look at it in that context as well. I know, Madhavan, you want to comment on what has been said, but again, I have very little time. If you had to quickly, very quickly, talk about what next? What is the unfinished agenda?
I would say, Tamanna, that the unfinished agenda lies again in reforming some of the agricultural aspects, and NREGA and wages are still crying out. Real wages have been stagnant. The country needs a new kind of an employment orientation. Even Make in India, we haven't mentioned it all today. It has been by and large a slogan and nothing else. And climate change is staring at us in the face. So there's a lot to do on those fronts. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Frankly, you talk about the gamut of economic reform and policy of 9 years, and we've tried to do it in a little over 20 minutes. So that's difficult to do. So please bear with us, but we've tried to make this crisp and encapsulate as much as we can. Of course, there's a lot more to speak on this. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on the show this evening. We'll take a very short break, but we'll be right back with a lot more.